KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger, a public affairs program featuring stories from all over the Central Valley with Sevag Tateosian, 90.7 KFSR.
I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Welcome to the Central Valley Ledger. We're recording out of the beautiful downtown Fresno studios of the Community Media Access Collaborative, Fresno and Clovis, not too far from the newly opened Fulton Street. If you haven't visited downtown lately, come check out all the cool things happening here. Our guest this week has been a guest of our program several times in the past couple of years. His name is Dr. Sergio La Porta. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Sevag. It's good to be here.
Well, and we love inviting you back because, number one, you're from Fresno State, and number two, you're involved in the community in multiple ways. First, tell us about yourself.
Okay, as you said, my name is Sergio La Porta, and I'm the Hagen Isabel Barbarian Professor of Armenian Studies at Fresno State. I'm also currently the chair of the Department of Philosophy, so I'm sort of wearing two hats. I came to Fresno in 2009, and I'm originally from New York City, but my family and I are really enjoying our time here in Fresno. It's a great place.
And I see you everywhere in the community. And the community loves you. They really like you. They approach you and they chat with you a bunch of different topics for a bunch of different things. What do you think of this community?
The community is fantastic. I mean, they're engaged, they're knowledgeable, and they're generous with their time and in talking and taking time out and in coming to our events and supporting the program. I mean, the program couldn't be what it is without the support of the community. So we're very grateful to the community, and I've just learned so much interacting with them and learning about Fresno Armenian history, which is fascinating. So it's been wonderful for me.
Also, you're the chair of the philosophy department. Yeah. That happened recently, right? I mean, how did that thing happen? And tell us about that experience.
Some friends asked me at the university, asked if I could fill in because the previous chair, who did a fantastic job, was tired after having done it for 8 years. And so they needed somebody to come in and sort of help out a little bit. So I said I'd be willing to do that. And it's been an interesting ride, but it is great to support younger faculty and help them through the retention, what we call the retention and tenure process. So,
you know, you have a very interesting background. I mean, you don't talk about your background much, but you've done a lot of studying and you've done a lot of traveling. Tell us a little bit about your work in the Middle East.
So when I finished my PhD in 2001, I was asked to teach at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem under Professor Michael Stone, and I did. I said yes. It was my first job, and I taught there from 2001 until 2009 when I came to Fresno, and it was fantastic. Really a fantastic experience to be in Jerusalem, to have fantastic colleagues, supportive colleagues who really value Armenian studies, and also to have the Armenian monastery there and that local Armenian community, which was also a great community that was very knowledgeable and had tons of stories. And it was great to work with the manuscripts at the Armenian monastery. So that was a wonderful experience. Our daughter was born there. But after we had our son, we decided that it probably needed to move back to the States. And when the job opened up at Fresno State, I applied and we made the move here. Didn't know what to expect, but we're loving it.
And yeah, I mean, I remember when you first came to the community and I met you, and you know, now I still see you out in the community doing various different things. For someone who's from out of town, who's looking at coming to Fresno, you're the perfect candidate. Here's why. From New York, the East Coast, right, and then you go to the Middle East, and then you find your way to Fresno. If someone's looking for a job in Fresno from one of these bigger places, bigger cities, would you recommend it? I
would. It depends on what part of your life, what time of life you're in. But for us, it's worked out to be very well. As I said, we have 2 kids. And the cost of living in Fresno is really affordable, and the quality of life is very good. And so that's made it a really worthwhile experience. I remember when I moved here, people said, oh, you're from New York, you lived in the Middle East, you're going to be bored to death in Fresno. And what happened was now I go to New York to relax. 'Cause it's so big. As you said, the community does so much, and there's so much going on with the university, and the university really is a generator of cultural events and of really social activities in general that, you know, we really get during term time in particular. There's really a moment to even breathe. So I go back to New York for the peace and quiet.
So one of the reasons why I invited you back this month is because Fresno State has a monument dedicated to the Armenian Genocide.
Yes.
And April 24th is the day of commemoration, not only for Armenian Americans in Fresno, but Armenian Americans nationally and worldwide. So it was fitting to invite you here to share a little bit about April 24th. So what happened on this day?
So April 24th, 1915 is normally considered the inception of the Armenian Genocide. It was the day in which the leading intellectuals and politicians and religious figures of the Armenian community in Constantinople were arrested by the Young Turk regime, or the Committee for Union and Progress regime of the Ottoman Empire. Most of them were shortly thereafter executed. Some of them languished in prison for a long time. So even though there had been violence prior to that moment, that date was chosen as the day to commemorate the genocide. Very quickly thereafterwards, in the first 4 months following that event, 800,000 Armenians were killed, murdered by the Ottoman Empire, and then obviously by the end of the genocide, 1.5 million had been killed and hundreds of thousands displaced, pretty much creating the diaspora that we're familiar with today.
So Fresno, we're sitting in downtown Fresno, not too far from where about 100 years ago, a lot of Armenians came from Armenia to settle here. So Fresno and the Armenian community, has the Armenian community been here for a while, and have they contributed? Yes,
I mean the Armenian community has been here since the late 19th century, even prior to the genocide, following events in the 1890s, in particular in the Ottoman Empire, when the Ottoman Sultan launched a series of massacres against the Armenians. More Armenians came, left the Ottoman Empire and came to the United States, and many of them wound up settling in Fresno. Of course, the most famous inhabitant of Fresno was William Saroyan, who grew up here. As you know, I think we're opening up the William Saroyan House Museum soon, which will be a fitting testament, I think, to his contribution in particular, not only to Fresno, but also to the country and to American literature. So that's just one example of the contribution, but obviously within the farming community, real estate, legal community, and the university, Armenians have had a profound impact on the greater Fresno community.
We're going to jump around because you brought in a perfect topic right now to talk about, William Saroyan. The Armenian Studies program recently had a banquet, which my wife and I attended.
Excellent.
Beautifully done, every year beautifully done. A lot of great stories about students, and really it's for the students.
It is, yes.
But as we walked in, there was a holograph of William Saroyan. Tell us about the holograph. People took pictures of it, and so in August there's going to be the museum opening up.
Right. I mean, as people know, as I said, William Saroyan grew up here, but he lived in several areas in Fresno, and one of his houses has been bought and is being transformed into this museum. And much of the museum is going to use modern technology in terms of creating holograms of William Saroyan so that you can interact with him. And it will speak and you'll hear his voice. And so it'll be a much more, I would say, three-dimensional experience, a much more in-depth experience than just going, it won't be just going to his house and saying, here's his chair, here's his desk. It's more to get a sense of what it would have been like to be with William Saroyan in that space. And so we were very happy, and we are very happy to be a part of that, to help out in any way we can, and to have and sort of advertise it a little bit at our banquet. But as you said, the banquet is really about the students.
So each year, the students come to the banquet. They get recognized for earning a scholarship. What I find unique about the scholarships is these are families that are providing scholarships for these students. And, you know, I remember when I was a student, as a student, you don't have much money, you know, and so every little bit counts. So receiving that scholarship went far for me. Talk about the contributors. How important are they?
They are so important, I can't even overestimate. I can't talk about them too much. And what is fantastic is the number of them, how many people in this community, and even some of them are from outside this community, feel that they need to contribute to the program and help these students. And it really is essential for them. Many students have been able to afford to go to Fresno State or stay in Fresno State because of these scholarships. And I'm really proud of the fact that when you're looking through the list of scholarships that are given throughout the university, Armenian Studies has probably the most of any program in terms of the number of scholarships we hand out to students. And so the banquet is a really positive time when we get to see the students who have received these awards and congratulate and recognize the effort that they've put in, and it's also for their families to also see their son, their daughter, their siblings, their grandchildren up there and being recognized by the university. And it's a way for us also to say thank you to those donors and show them this is, you gave money, but this is the product, right? We thank you for your contribution, but you can actually see where it goes to, and it didn't just disappear. So it's really a fantastic occasion.
And it's always great to see President Castro at the event. You've got the dean, and so you've got several people in the audience.
Many people from throughout the university, other department chairs, as you mentioned, the dean, the associate dean, President Castro. Often it's also Mrs. Castro accompanies him, members of the administration. They're all there to celebrate the students and to recognize the great work that this community has been doing towards supporting students in the Armenian Studies program. And we are very, very grateful to the support we get from the administration at all levels, whether it's at the college level or it's at the university level. It's been a real joy to interact with them and go to them and say, look, we'd like to put this on. And they come back with a positive reaction. Yes, let's do it. How can we make this happen? How can we grow the program? How can we have more students involved? What can we do in order to strengthen the program and get the word out there further? So they're always challenging us, keeping us busy to expand our footprint, but we're appreciative of that. It's a very special relationship we have.
And it's a wonderful evening. Going back to the genocide, one thing that I remember very well is the young lady who got up and spoke about her grandma telling her about the genocide, and that was her introduction. And so it's interesting because this occurred 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Massacres occurred over 100 years ago, but there's still that, I want to say demand or wound, or I don't know how to classify it, other than there's that notion that this needs to be recognized and dealt with 100 years later.
Yeah, well, it happened 100 years ago, but it's still very personal. Right? Every Armenian has a story from the genocide. And it's affected them in many different ways. The most readily, noticeable one is why they're even growing up in another country. Right? Why aren't they growing up in the Ottoman Empire or in the Republic of Turkey, if everything, or in Armenia, in that sense, in Armenia as the way it was as historical Armenia. The very fact that they're here, right, is a constant reminder. Right, there's a reason, and the reason has to do with the genocide. The fact that it is not recognized by the Republic of Turkey as having happened obviously makes the wound of that tragedy even deeper. And it's been slow going, but more and more countries do recognize it. We're now up to 48 of the United States officially.
Almost at all of them?
Almost all of them officially recognize it. It's starting to trickle up into the education system. I think that's where more still needs to be done. Even though by California law it has to be taught, we still need to keep putting pressure on the education system to ensure that it's taught, and not just taught in isolation, but really as part and parcel of the turn of the 20th century, the problems with modernity, and also with U.S. history for the tremendous good that the United States tried to do in the immediate aftermath, launching the largest humanitarian aid effort ever to this day. And none of this is usually taught in school. I lecture on this all the time, ask people, how many of you learned, recent graduates, how many of you learned about this in school. Maybe 1, 2 people out of 300 put their hand up. And that's just not right. It's an important part of Armenian history, of course, but also, and of Middle Eastern history, of course, but also of United States history and of world history as pertains to the rise of modernity.
One thing I find interesting is people now, there are movie stars and celebrities that are coming out demanding recognition. Montel Williams, the other actor that played Superman.
Right, Christian Bale.
Christian Bale in his new movie, you know, The Promise.
Okay, yes.
Christian Bale. So we've had a lot of celebrities. And, you know, I say this and some people get mad at me, but Kim Kardashian, a lot of people know who she is. When she went and she talked about the genocide, a lot of people were asking questions. What is this? What is this? I want to ask you, publicity, is it good? I mean, I know that like there are people in the community that have a bad reputation, or, you know, either you love them or you hate them, right? But if they get on board and they say, right, let's recognize the genocide, could that be good?
Publicity about the genocide can be good in terms of spreading the word, making more people aware, or even raising the question like, oh, what is that? Never heard of it. Maybe I should look into it further. So in that sense, I think it can be good. However, you know, I also want to remind people that recognition, you know, is a goal, but it's not an end goal. And I often ask people, okay, once, let's say, everybody recognizes it, then what?
I know where this is going, and I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Where do you go afterwards? And I'm not thinking that the Armenian community has done this, but to wait for Turkey to do something is not a way to go forward, right? If just waiting for someone else to recognize it, as important as that may be, you can't allow yourself to put your own life on hold for somebody else, right? So what actions can we take today? And that's a challenge. I think the younger generation of Armenians, it's very impressive, have been moving in so many different ways and in so many different areas, whether it's in arts, music, politics, and writers, that we are seeing Armenian culture develop. Where it's going, you know, we don't know yet. We may know, 25, 50 years from now. We'll have retrospectives to see what this generation of Armenians, both in the Republic of Armenia and in the diaspora, how they negotiate life after the genocide. And that, I think, will be a much longer lasting legacy than whether Turkey ever admits it or not, which to me is a bigger problem for the Turks, for the Republic itself. Is if it wants to continue living a lie, then it will never have a true democracy, and that hurts the people who live there, including some Armenians who still live there, but also mainly the Turkish population, right, and the citizens of Turkey. If they do come to grips with it, I think that will put them on a better path towards a brighter future. Regardless of which way the Republic of Turkey decides to go with this, and the government, whatever official position it wishes to take, Armenians also have to control their own fate. And that's a huge question that really needs to be explored constantly. That's a never-ending question.
So we are in Fresno. We're sitting in downtown Fresno right now, recording this interview, thousands of miles away from Turkey, from Armenia, from where this tragedy occurred. Do we, I mean, and we're still commemorating, Saturday, April 21st, there'll be a flag raising at City Hall. Fresno State, the students and the community put something on April 24th at Fresno State. I hear the Armenian school is doing something as well around the 24th, as well as other things are happening around the 24th.
It's a very busy week.
It's happening in Fresno, and we're thousands of miles away, 100 years later. Do you ever see this dying down? Do you ever see people saying, okay, we're going to stop doing this, we're not commemorating anymore?
Yes and no. What do I mean by that? What I mean by yes and no is that it's not going to be the same, right, going forward. And it's already changed, right? The way we commemorate today is not the same way that was commemorated 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 50 years ago. The way we commemorate changes, as it should, because as we study this more, as we learn more about it, as new generations come into place, its impact on the people who are living changes. And I think a major, at least psychological change happened in 2015 at the commemoration, the 100th commemoration of the centennial of the genocide, when the Armenian Church declared that the victims of the genocide were no longer really victims, but are now saints. This was not a non-controversial move, and people are debating back and forth whether that could be done and whether it should have been done. But in general, it turns our minds away from the past, of just mourning the past, to looking towards the future, which I think is an important thing to do. And that commemoration, there are different types of commemoration. One is to just hang back and say what we lost, right? And, which was undoubtedly a lot. It was huge.
Not just life.
Not just life.
Chunks of land, wealth.
Right, culture, and it's not just, I mean, the Armenians first and foremost, but the entire area.
The Greeks, the Assyrians.
Right. Oh, yes, but in the loss of those communities, right, the region also lost a huge developer of regional culture, right? I mean, and if Armenians had been, if it had been a completely different world and Armenians were still there, it's unimaginable how much. It would be a very different place, but what they could have done, given those circumstances, may have been, it's absolutely unimaginable how much they could have progressed there and done for that area. But we can't argue counterfactuals. But nonetheless, by making the victims, the ones who were murdered, into saints, and saying that we no longer mourn them, but we turn to them for guidance, that we turn to them to ask for their intercession, flips the dynamic around so that we're not just thinking about what we lost, but how does the past inform us going forward? Is it so that it's not just nostalgia, and it's not just about preserving so that nothing changes or trying to recapture something that was lost, but it now turns to the future and say, okay, how does their experience, how they live their lives challenge us to live our own? How does it guide us? How can we turn to them to look for support and guidance going forward to make this world a better one, right? To enrich our own lives, to make sure that we carelessly, right, don't lose what they were forced to give up. And I think that moment of changing these victims into saints, despite all the controversy and argument around it, it was an important one for that reason, because it allows now the space to look forward and not backwards. And we see that, I think, with the younger generations trying to to push forward in new ways. And I think that's a very healthy dynamic.
During these commemoration events, people not just remember the Armenians, but remember different groups that have been persecuted.
Sure.
And there are groups today that are continuing to be persecuted or isolated for various reasons. And so, we're running out of time this week, but I would love to continue to talk to you about this one day.
And you mentioned the Assyrians and the Greeks, who also were decimated at that period as well.
So there is a monument on campus that people can go to.
Yes.
Where is it? And if someone hasn't been there, do you recommend them going?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if you haven't been there, it's at the center of the campus, at the end of the Rose Garden, near the Peters Business Center, and also near the Conley Arts Center and the music department, right there in the center. It has it's a wonderful monument. It's the only one of its size on any university campus in the country.
Which is great for Fresno State.
Yes, and we do, and people are there all the time, and they do visit, and they either as Armenians who are going to commemorate and to think about what happened, or students just walking by saying, "What is this?" and looking. And there are informational tablets as you walk around. So that you can learn about Armenian history as well as the genocide. It doesn't just talk about the genocide. And it also explains the symbolism of the architecture. So I think it is a remarkable monument. It's a great achievement for the community, and we're very, very grateful that the university was 100% behind it.
And it sounds like the university is supportive of
Yes.
many of the things that the Armenian Studies program does. You know, we have a few more minutes left.
Yeah.
We're running out of time. How can people learn more about you, some of the different things happening on campus, learn more about Fresno State?
The best way of doing that, I mean, I'm Googling it, but going to the Fresno State website and going to the Armenian Studies webpage on the Fresno State website. We have all of our events listed there. We also have the Armenian Studies Facebook page, and the Armenian Students Organization have their Facebook page where they also post a large amount of the activities that are going on both on and off campus. Obviously, coming up, the big one is on April 24th, when we will have the commemoration at 6 p.m. That's the community one. The students will have one at noon, but the community one will be at 6 p.m. At the monument. The president of the university will say a few words, and our keynote speaker will be Dr. Khachik Muradian, who will be visiting from Columbia University.
And you'll get a kick out of this. He has been a guest on this
yes,
program
right,
too.
exactly. And he's been a visiting professor at Fresno State. The Armenian Studies program also has the Kazan visiting professorship, and that's intended to provide, I would say, more in-depth analysis of the Armenian genocide from a variety of perspectives through bringing in a visiting scholar once a year, so for a semester a year. So we really love
Dr.
that.
La Porta, thank you so much for being here. We're out of time this
sir.
week on the program.
Thanks very much.
That's all for this edition of the Central Valley Ledger. We've been recording out of the beautiful downtown Fresno studios of the Community Media Access Collaborative Fresno and Clovis. Thank you to our wonderful volunteers that make this production and every production possible. Their names are at the end of the program. They're in the studio now, making us look and sound good. Thank you to those listening to this broadcast on KFSR 90.7 FM, and to those watching on the CMAC channels, Comcast 93 and AT&T 99. We hope you enjoyed the program this week. Tune in next week to a new edition.
KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger every Sunday morning at 11:30. For complete program schedule, visit kfsr.org.